Hello there and welcome back to another Genshin discussion that might end up being more controversial than what I intend. So, the short answer to the title and question, no, I do not believe Genshin needs an endgame. But before I get cancelled, hear me out. What's the long answer then? Well, it's quite complicated. But one thing I want to make sure you all know is that I personally want Genshin to have more content, and that includes endgame. Just because my personal opinion on what Genshin as a game is doesn't mean I do not want more stuff to do in the game. More content means more people can enjoy the game for longer. By the way, if you do end up enjoying the video, why not leave a like, comment, or even subscribe? So with that out of the way, let's begin with a big question that I feel is quite relevant here. What genre does Genshin belong to? Well, it's an action RPG set in a vast open world with a rich story and co-op elements. When you hear that, what other games do you think of? Maybe games like The Witcher 3 or GTA 5, right? Games that, generally, you complete their story and whatever exploration content is available and then move on to the next game. They do sound quite a bit similar, but Genshin has a problem here. That problem is the fact that its story is told in intervals that last a month and a half. That makes it in such a way that the story content is spread out way too thin when it comes to the average player. At that point, players start looking for other things to do, that is exploration. But what happens when that is done too? Well, it depends on what kind of player you are. If you're playing Genshin casually, you might just run around for a while and then play some other game. On the other hand, there are the hardcore players that want to build different characters, min-max them, and clear the hardest content in the game. Without endgame, the sad reality is that both of these players will get bored of Genshin quite quickly, as there isn't a repeatable endgame activity. Yeah, the Abyss can be done again and again, but after clearing it once in the 3-week rotation, that's kind of it. There's no real other reason to do it again. Because of this, no matter what kind of player you are, the game will get stale at some point, as generally the new content in a patch can be cleared in a week or two. Maybe even less for dry patches. That leaves the majority of players with 4 weeks or so of nothing new to do other than menial tasks and events that sometimes aren't even that fun. A while ago, because of some issues, the patch cycle was changed to a 5-week one instead of 6, and honestly that felt way better. The unfortunate reality is that was a thing mainly in order to get back to the normal schedule they had. The 6-week schedule is also understandable in a way, as developing content for a game patch by patch, even if there are some things done in advance, can be quite a big task, especially when it comes to an open world game. Now, let's also talk about Starhill and the gacha environment. Why does Starhill have so much more endgame than Genshin? Because it literally needs it to survive. I love Starhill as much as anyone else, but the reality is that it is competing in a way bigger market. The endgame, all its updates, more frequent characters, and slight power creep from update to update is in the turn-based / idle part of the gacha genre. With the majority of gacha games entering the same space, Starhill has a lot more competition, so it needs to retain players somehow, so constant endgame updates will happen throughout its lifecycle. Genshin, on the other hand, while being another gacha game, it doesn't really have competition at the moment. Wuthering Waves is going to come out soon, and hopefully it will be good competition to get Genshin to try harder at retaining players, maybe through some actual endgame and quality of life improvements. While I thought about what to talk in this part of the video, I stumbled upon a side of the endgame content argument that could end up splitting the entire player base between free-to-plays and whales. That is, who will this endgame be for? Which part will be the main focus when it comes to endgame? Of course, if the endgame is user-generated, this entirely relies on the creators of said content to curate the difficulty of what they create. But what if Hoyo introduces other possibilities like new Abyss floors? Currently, with some decent investment and decent characters, you can quite easily clear floor 12 and get your Primo gems even as a free-to-play. You can even do it with the 4-star characters that you get for free. There have been people doing that. But how would these new hypothetical floors be balanced? If you make them balanced around free-to-plays, you run into the problem that whales don't have any content to use their high constellations and high refinement weapons on. Instead, the whales would end up not spending any more money because they don't really have reason to, and would lose a lot of revenue. If you balance it around whales, then you have the opposite effect. A lot of free-to-play players will be annoyed that they can't complete the hardest floors without money investment or spending years saving up for high constellation characters. This could work though by having dynamic difficulty but keeping the same rewards. This way it would be challenging for both the free-to-plays and the whale players, and both would get the same rewards. Or you could still have rewards get bigger and bigger the higher the difficulty, but make it like in most events where the base reward in the next tier are primo gems, and anything above that will be resources that could help you, but they would still be obtainable in other ways. For example, let's say we get floor 13. This new floor would have 4 levels of difficulty that you can choose from. Difficulty 1, let's say, has enemies around level 100, so it's on par with floor 12 or slightly higher. And these levels increase by a couple numbers on each higher difficulty. Difficulty 1 and 2 rewards are 150 primo gems each alongside some resources, kind of like how floor 9 to 12 do it. This way, the free-to-plays with decent character investment can still clear it, even if maybe not entirely and not as easily, so it would be harder content for them. And the whales that want to get challenged can continue on to the next difficulties, 3 and 4, that would give, I'm not sure, let's say 50 XP books and 100 weapon ores in total. These extra resources, while important for the free-to-plays, are still obtainable in the game and generally don't impact an account that much more, or at least as much as the primo gems would. This way, the free-to-plays get challenged by doing floor 13 difficulty 1 and 2, and whales get challenged by doing difficulty 3 and 4. And you also don't really have discrepancy in rewards because all primo gems, being the most important part of the rewards, are given to both players. But rewards aren't really everything, as if whatever this new endgame is, if it isn't fun to play, then it doesn't really matter. Then what could this endgame look like? Well, the cheapest and easiest way would be to just add more abyss floors, increase the levels of the enemies and call it a day. Of course, I think I talk for most players that this would not be a good way of doing it, just more of the same but harder. Most people wouldn't even bother with a floor 13, for example, unless there is something more special about it when it comes to gameplay. What about the user-generated content that we saw on the job listing a while ago? Well, we also had some events that went into this some time ago, and those are quite fun, and everyone was able to create their own domains and challenges within said domains. If the tools that Hoyoverse would develop would allow us to take near full advantage of everything Genshin can offer, I feel like this could be an amazing way of doing endgame. Some creators would make very hard domains, maybe even with more than 4 players in them, like raids. Who knows? Others would make parkour maps, hide and seek maps, etc, etc. The possibilities are near endless, but only as long as you get the proper tools. If it's just like, make this domain, but you can add 2 villagers and a boss, but only up to level 95, then yeah, this will still be kind of interesting, but it will limit its potential. As I've said, a near limitless customization potential would bring near infinite possibilities. Another thing I feel like could benefit endgame is the introduction of further world levels. Currently, the world level max is 8, with most enemies being around level 90 but mostly below. When your characters and weapons get to level 90, overworld enemies become a literal joke. Overworld exploration becomes very easy as most enemies are defeated near instantly. Then what if you could increase the world level past 8? Maybe have a max of 12 world levels, where each level increases the monster level by 3. This way you would have overworld monsters at the same level as floor 12 of the Abyss. Maybe you could even have higher levels than that too. This way overworld exploration would become more difficult and more enjoyable for a lot of players who have well invested characters. Of course, if you don't want to fight enemies over level 100, you could just stick to world level 8. In this version, you would be able to change between world level 8 and 12 or any of the in-betweens at will. The loot amount could also increase with these world levels to reward players who will do a lot of investment in their characters, but I'm not too certain about it. Here I'm thinking of balancing between free-to-plays or whales, so one doesn't really get that huge of an advantage over each other. Another thing that a lot of players seem to want and could work at least as a band-aid solution is the return of most of the existing minigames and game modes that have been introduced in Genshin throughout the events that came and now are gone. Wind Trace, for example, is returning in 4.6, but I would love to be able to do a round or two of it from time to time. There are also more relaxing ones, like the newly introduced Cat Fortress event, where you play with cute little cats, or the previous bartending event, or cooking events. It would be really nice to introduce these as permanent events and minigames that you can replay in your free time. While not some difficult new content, I feel like this could be benefiting for the longevity of Genshin as a general thing, not necessarily as an endgame. And now for the big one, and the one I really hope would happen in Genshin. That is the introduction of a simulated universe type game mode, like the one from Star Rail. I honestly believe that if this happens, everyone would be satisfied. Or, other than those that will start saying, oh look, they copied Star Rail. Yeah, guess what? Both games are done by the same company. Either way, a roguelike style game mode would be quite perfect, and we've seen something similar before that. Lots of possible builds with different augments. Difficulty could go higher the longer you are in a run, or they could use the world system from Star Rail. It would be really cool to see what archetypes would develop throughout this, like how each path in Star Rail focuses on certain aspects of combat. Maybe they could do it with each element, and the more Hydro blessings you get, the more HP you heal or the more HP you have. The more Pyro blessings, the more damage you do. The more Dendro blessings, the more your reactions gain more and more damage. Things like those could be interesting to see how they would do it. So, out of the possibilities I talked about above, I feel like two are the most likely. Of course, we have the user-generated content, and the second would be an expansion to the Abyss. Why do I think the Abyss expansion is more likely? Well, it's rumored that in 4.7 we might have something new in the Abyss. I know real information on what that is, as we are quite ways off from that update, but it does sound exciting. But out of the two, which do I think would be best? Well, it entirely depends on what each does. Will the user-generated one give us near unlimited freedom with what we can do, or will it be very limited? Will the new Abyss content be more of the same, or will it be something new and exciting? So each of them have a timeline in which it's good and one in which it's bad. At this point, it is all about waiting for future updates and seeing with our own eyes what will be brought by those updates. So what's my conclusion in the end? Well, I don't believe Genshin requires an endgame, but would benefit enormously from having something added so players have what to play during the dry periods of the different patches. Even without an endgame, Genshin will not die off like some are saying, as every time a new important patch comes out, people always come back and new players will arrive. That is, as stated before, not to discredit the amount of good that a repeatable endgame mode could do. The patch cycle situation would finally not be that big of a problem because the endgame could hold players for longer periods of time, and if new updates come to it every 2 patches or so, it could be sustainable until the end of the story, if not even further. If Genshin was more like other games and released all its story and world at once, I truly don't think we would even have this issue to such a high degree as to which it is now. There's also the upcoming competition that Wuthering Waves and honestly even ZZZ will bring. Wuthering Waves will have endgame from the very start, and I'm quite excited to try it out. And ZZZ, while not being an open world or having much exploration, the fact that the combat is similar to Genshin, if not possibly better, might make a lot of combat-oriented players move to it. If it will have some good endgame, it's even better. There are some other games coming out too that will try to compete with Genshin. The moment those get released, it will be interesting to see what Hoyoverse decides to do for Genshin's future. They should really start working on stuff like endgame or more important quality of life updates. Right now, we don't really know what endgame looks like. Could be more Abyss, could be something entirely different. Whatever it will end up being, Hoyoverse needs to be careful what kind of content they make and for who it will really be balanced in order to not alienate parts of its community. Because for as much money as whales make them, free-to-plays and small spenders are still really important. In the end, I'll continue playing Genshin until its end, and possibly in part 2 if that will be a proper thing. I started playing for a character back in 2.1, and now here I am over 2 years later still playing. I had my own burnout periods like most players, but at this point I'm quite excited to see where Genshin goes next. Even if they never address the endgame issue, at least we still have an awesome open world with an interesting story told through characters we love. That is not to say that there aren't issues in other parts of the game, but that would be for another time. Hey, thanks for watching the video. I was kind of scared of making this on, as this is quite a controversial topic, talking about endgame, and especially when you don't really have the same opinion as the majority. As I said before, it would be awesome to get something more, and who doesn't want more Genshin, right? Well, the things I talked about in this video, like rewards balancing and what kind of content would this endgame be, are, in my opinion, something not a lot of players really think about when demanding it. Game development in general is quite hard, and especially when making a game that's so highly popular. I really want to see more from Genshin, as the potential is there, and honestly, with Starl we do see part of said potential. Then again, the development cycle is most likely totally different between the two games. The only thing is that some of the decisions made are not really working towards realizing that potential for Genshin, and said issues have been talked about before, like having lore locked behind time-limited events. But this topic would require its own video. Today, we are here just for endgame stuff. But yeah, that's about it from me for this video. I do want to see endgame, and I really hope it's as good, if not even better, than the one in Star Rail. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.